Happiness always seems to belong to someone else. Not a specific someone. Just someone who isn't you. Someone who doesn't notice the things you notice. Someone who can sit in a room full of people and feel genuinely, uncomplainingly present, instead of half present and half somewhere else entirely, watching the room from a slight distance, running quiet commentary on everything, including themselves. If you recognize that, the watching from a distance, the commentary that never stops, the sense that your mind is always doing something when everyone else's seems to simply rest, then this video is going to say something you've probably already half suspected. The same mind that makes you perceptive, that lets you see things other people miss, that drives you toward depth and meaning and the kind of conversations that actually matter. That mind is also the reason happiness feels slippery, temporary, always slightly out of reach, or already gone by the time you notice it was there. This is not a coincidence. And it is not a flaw. It is a very specific set of mechanisms, built into how certain minds process the world, and once you understand them, the struggle stops feeling like a personal failure and starts feeling like what it actually is, the predictable cost of a particular kind of intelligence. Man only likes to count his troubles, he doesn't calculate his happiness. Dostoevsky. He wasn't offering consolation. He was making an observation about the architecture of the mind, one that most people who think deeply have felt in their bones long before they found the words for it. The question is not whether this is true. The question is what you do with it. Happiness, at its most basic level, requires presence. It requires being in the moment fully enough to register that the moment is good. The overthinking mind is structurally resistant to this. Not because it is broken. Because it is doing what it does best: processing, analyzing, projecting, connecting. It is taking the present moment and immediately doing something with it, examining it, contextualizing it, identifying what it means and what comes next and what could go wrong and whether this good thing is as good as it seems or whether there's something being missed. By the time the analysis is done, the moment is gone, and the mind moves to the next one. This is why deep thinkers often report feeling most alive in retrospect. The holiday was wonderful. 2 weeks later, looking back, the conversation was exactly what they needed. Hours afterward, in the quiet, the good period in their life was only recognizable as a good period once it had ended and they could see its shape from a distance. They missed it while it was happening, not out of negligence, because their mind was somewhere else, in the future, in the analysis, in the layer beneath the surface of things, even while their body was in the room. There is a second mechanism running underneath this one, and it is darker. The mind that thinks deeply also feels deeply, and feeling deeply cuts in both directions. The joy is richer, yes, but so is the dread, the anticipation of loss, the awareness, always present in some corner of the mind, that good things end, that everything ends. Most people can enjoy a meal without thinking about the fact that one day they won't be able to. Most people can be in a relationship without a quiet background awareness of its potential end. Most people can feel happiness without it arriving already laced with the foreknowledge of its passing. Deep thinkers often cannot. The awareness of impermanence doesn't stay in the background, it steps forward. It sits at the table. It adds a layer of melancholy to moments that, in a mind with less depth, would simply be good. This is not pathology. It is the cost of seeing clearly, of being unable to look at something beautiful without also seeing how temporary it is. But here's what I want to get into, because this is where it gets genuinely complicated. The overthinking mind doesn't just miss happiness. In a way that most people never examine, it actively resists it. There's a specific reason why, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with identity. We'll get there. There is something that happens, gradually and mostly without conscious awareness, to people who think deeply and feel things intensely. they begin to identify with their depth. The seriousness, the sensitivity, the capacity for complexity, these become not just traits they have, but core parts of who they are. And somewhere in that identification, happiness starts to feel like a threat. Not consciously. Not in a way they would ever admit out loud. But in the way they behave when it arrives. Because if happiness requires a certain lightness, a willingness to be simple, to enjoy something without immediately dissecting it, to let a good thing be exactly what it is, then for someone whose identity is built around depth and complexity, happiness starts to feel like a kind of betrayal of their intelligence, of the version of themselves they've been building since they first realized they were different from the people around them. Watch what happens when a deep thinker is in a genuinely good period. When things are actually working. When the anxiety has quieted and the circumstances are favorable and there is, objectively, nothing to worry about. They find something to worry about. Not because they are masochistic. Because the worry is familiar. Because the weight is part of how they know themselves. Because a mind that has spent years in the serious work of examining the world does not know what to do with its own stillness, and interprets the absence of a problem as a sign that the problem hasn't been found yet. The philosopher who cannot enjoy a sunset because he's thinking about the heat death of the universe. The writer who cannot finish a good meal without cataloging what it represents and what it costs and who doesn't have it. The person in a loving relationship who waits, with quiet vigilance, for the moment it reveals itself to be something else. This is the identity trap. The depth that makes you extraordinary in so many directions also makes you a stranger to ease. And ease, not ecstasy, not transcendence, just ordinary ease, is the foundation on which most of what we call happiness is actually built. The mind that can hold the most complexity is often the least able to rest inside something simple. And happiness, stripped of all philosophy, is mostly simple. That is precisely why it escapes the people most equipped to understand everything else. This is the part that the underground man understood, even if understanding it didn't save him. The awareness of the trap is not the same as the exit. Earlier I said the overthinking mind resists happiness for reasons that have to do with identity. And now you've seen the shape of it. So what do you do with that? The first thing, and this is harder than it sounds, is to stop treating depth and happiness as mutually exclusive. There is a story that runs, largely unexamined, through the minds of people who think deeply, that suffering is more honest than peace. That complexity is more real than simplicity. That the person who worries less simply hasn't understood enough to worry more. That happiness, in some fundamental way, requires a kind of intellectual compromise, a decision to look away from the things you can see. That story is wrong. And it is costing you. Depth is not the same as suffering. Seriousness is not the same as misery. The ability to hold complexity does not require you to be unable to hold a good morning, or a quiet evening, or 15 minutes of something simple that asks nothing of your mind. Those things do not diminish the depth. They sustain the person who carries it. The second thing is to notice, without judgment, with genuine curiosity, what happens when something good arrives. Not to stop the analysis. You cannot stop the analysis. But to add one more question to it. Am I engaging with this, or am I leaving it? Is my mind in this room or somewhere else? Not as a criticism, as information. Because the mind that overthinks can also be redirected. It is powerful in whatever direction it's pointed. The habit of dissecting experience can, with patience, become the habit of inhabiting it. Not instead of depth, alongside it. The awareness that has always been applied outward, to the world and its problems, can be turned, slowly, deliberately, inward toward the present moment. This is not the same as mindfulness as it's usually sold. It is not about emptying the mind. It is about choosing, in a given moment, what the mind does with what's in front of it. Choosing to let a good thing be exactly what it is, for just long enough to register that it's good, before moving on to what it means. The third thing, and this is the one most deep thinkers resist most fiercely, is to allow yourself to want happiness. Not as a final destination, not as a solved problem, not as a permanent state you've earned through sufficient suffering. Just as a direction. As something you're moving toward rather than something you've philosophically disqualified yourself from. The intelligence that can map every reason happiness is complicated can also map the way toward it. It has always been capable of both. The question is which one you've been asking it to do. I want to say something to the person who has spent years feeling like happiness was designed for someone with a simpler mind than theirs. You were not wrong that the world is complicated. You were not wrong that things end, that joy is temporary, that there is always more beneath the surface than most people stop to look for. You were not wrong to look. But somewhere in all that looking, you may have started treating the looking itself as the only honest response to being alive. As if the person who rests is the person who has given up. As if the mind that quiets, even for an hour, has somehow capitulated to something. It hasn't. The depth you carry is not in competition with your peace. It does not require suffering as proof of its existence. It does not need you to be exhausted to be real. Some of the most serious, most perceptive, most genuinely intelligent people who have ever lived understood this, not as a philosophical conclusion but as a daily practice. The capacity to think deeply and the capacity to rest in something simple, side by side, each making the other more possible. Not a smaller life. A larger one. Large enough to contain both the complexity and the quiet. Both the examination and the moment being examined. Both the awareness of impermanence and the willingness to be present anyway, precisely because things end, not despite it. The struggle you've had with happiness is not evidence that you're too broken for it. It is evidence that your mind takes everything seriously, including the things that other minds let pass without examination. That seriousness is part of what makes you who you are. It does not have to be the reason you can't rest. Let something be good today, even for a few minutes. Not because you've resolved everything. Not because the questions have answers. Because you're still here. And being here still counts for something. If this found you at the right moment, you already know what to do with it. Subscribe to Deep Sigh.